Hey, this is Austin Weber with Weber Bracketology, where every day is Selection Sunday. Some of the biggest news from the past week was Kyle Filipowski returning to Duke, and along with Tyrese Proctor and Mark Mitchell, that's three of the highly recruited freshmen that Duke had last year coming back, which is kind of unprecedented. I mean, it's the first time Duke has returned their leading scorer since Grayson Allen in 2016, and Filipowski is the first freshman to score over 10 points per game for Duke to come back for a sophomore season since Luke Kennard. So, by Duke standards, next year, it looks like this team is going to be pretty old. While Kyle Filipowski is the big name player returning being Duke's leading scorer and rebounder, Tyrese Proctor and Mark Mitchell were two of the other top four scorers for the team. The other one is Jeremy Roach, and he entered the draft, but he's maintaining his eligibility, so there's a chance, though I think it's pretty slim, that he does end up coming back to join the other three. As players go into their sophomore year, they usually take a pretty big jump, and Kyle Filipowski, he was already really good last year. He was a good scorer inside. He had a decent three-point shot, which can only get better. He was a great rebounder. So if he takes another step, I mean, that's probably getting towards at least ACC Player of the Year type level, and maybe even a national All-American. Tyrese Proctor was already making huge strides down the stretch to end the season, and honestly, I thought he would enter the draft just because of that, because personally, I'm a big fan of him, though he's not the most elite athlete. I think he could have potentially been a lottery pick. Well, maybe not a lottery pick, but he would have been a first-round pick. But coming back next year, he's going to be their lead guard if Jeremy Roach is gone. And, I mean, his three-point shot was getting better throughout the year. He's a really good passer. So adding Filipowski to Proctor, I mean, that's going to be one of the better inside-outside combos in the ACC for sure, and really in the entire country. Mark Mitchell is a bit more raw of a player. He still does get his points, but I think his jump could be significantly more than the other two, just because I think he had a little bit more to work on in terms of skills. Athletically, he's probably the best of the three, but adding the skills to that, I mean, that's going to be a really good trio of sophomores for Duke, and that's not something they usually have. And that's not all that Duke's bringing back. I mean, Ryan Young, off the bench, he's still going to be there. Jalen Blakes, he didn't play very much, but he's still going to be there. That's depth. So just from returning players, and that's only 5 returning players, but Duke, when you add in all the talent coming in, this has the potential to be a really deep team for next season. With the talent coming in, there's 4 5-star players, and that's not even counting Mackenzie Mbakpo, who decommitted. He may have been the top recruit of those, but they still have 4 other 5-star recruits coming in to join 3 former high-level recruits. I mean, that's a lot of talent on a team, because when you think about Duke, they have a lot of talent on their team all the time. I mean, they had Zion Williams and R.J. Barrett playing together, and I mean, there was more talent on that team too. But this Duke team never has talent that's experienced, because the talent always tends to leave early. So combining the two, I think Duke is looking to potentially have a championship caliber team, probably for the first time since Zion Williamson and R.J. Barrett were there. Sean Stewart, Jared McCain, Caleb Foster, and TJ Power, they're all going to be a big part of the rotation. 2 of them are going to be in the starting lineup almost surely if Jeremy Roach is gone. So, I mean, they probably won't have to get as many minutes as freshmen usually end up playing for Duke, and maybe that hurts a little bit because their talent isn't on the court as much as other freshman groups have been, but that means that Duke's not going to have to rely on these freshmen. They're going to be able to rely on someone like Kyle Filipowski, who is really who they relied on as a freshman to get their scoring inside and kind of outside. But the experience they're going to have is just going to be much different than the Duke teams we've been seeing. Duke still hasn't picked up a transfer so far in the first month of the transfer portal, but I mean, they don't really need any, given that they have a deep enough roster to play 9, 10 deep, which is more than most teams are going to end up playing by the end of the year anyway, but they could still add in a shooter or maybe 2, just some veterans from the transfer portal, just to give them that experience, who they may not need to play a lot, but getting the experience on your team is really important, even though they do have those players that are returning, which is Again, not normal for the last decade of Duke basketball. Obviously, rosters are still shaping up. Teams are still letting players leave in the portal. They're still looking for players in the portal. There's still some recruiting stuff that needs to wrap up. But Duke is looking like they're going to be in tension for the number one overall team going into the next season, with teams like UConn, if they bring everyone back they need to, Marquette, who's bringing basically everyone back, Purdue, who's bringing basically everyone back, including the National Player of the Year and Zach Edey. But Duke, they have more talent than these teams. They may not be as experienced as those teams, but they're going to be more experienced than they were this year and most years. Duke, they won the ACC tournament, and I believe they won 10 of their last 11 games of the season going into the tournament. And I had Duke as they were my Final Four pick. I had them as a national title contender going to the tournament, and it wasn't just because it's Duke and they're talented. It's because at that point in the season, they were playing really well, and they were playing really well together. So they're going to be bringing that talent, not all of it, but a good chunk of it compared to what they usually do, back, and then adding some really talented players on top of that in the form of 4 or 5-star freshmen. If Duke can replace the shooting, they weren't a very good shooting team. Duke, that's been a kind of a problem they've had lately because they've had lots of young players, and lots of freshmen don't come in like Grady Dick as great three-point shooters. So if they can replace some of the shooting they had from Derek Whitehead and some of Jeremy Roach's shooting, because he's a decent three-point shooter. I mean, I'm expecting Kyle Filipowski to get better. Tyrese Proctor was getting better. Mark Mitchell, he can develop a three-point shot that's a little more consistent. And then they're going to have shooters like McCain and Foster who can shoot the three ball. And so the way this Duke team is shaping up, because I don't really see anyone on their roster leaving. No one is going to enter the transfer portal, I think, in the next month from Duke. That would be very surprising. So really, they can only build off this roster that they have, and I think Kyle Filipowski coming back is going to be one of the biggest players to come back in college basketball next year, just because of what he brings to Duke. And it's really the trio of him, Proctor, and Mitchell that you just don't see that many players coming back after their freshman year to Duke, especially 3 players that played as well as they did. And those 3 are all going to be NBA players. Obviously, Filipowski is not the kind of center completely that teams are looking for. He can move his feet well in pick and roll. He can shoot a little bit. He's not just a down on the block kind of guy. But I think he's going to improve this next year, and he's going to hopefully he can build up his draft stock a little bit more. Because, I mean, he probably would have gone around the 20 range, maybe a little bit earlier than that, probably, but not in the lottery. So I'm excited to see what a more veteran Duke team could look like, because I think the reason they haven't had a shot to win a title, I mean, I know they were in the Final Four last season, but they really haven't had many teams that look like national title contenders because they've been so young. There was the Zion Williamson, R.J. Barrett team that obviously was really good, but I think that this next year's Duke team will be their best team probably since they won the national title back when Jahlil Okafor was there. That was a long time ago. And when you look at like when Grayson Allen was there, they did make the Final Four with him. They had more veteran players there at that time. Do I think Duke's going to end up being the preseason number 1? If UConn is bringing everyone back except for Jordan Hawkins, probably not, because UConn, I mean, during the season, besides really January, they were probably the best team in the country. It just, they lost a lot of games in that span of time, and that really hurt their seeding. So do I think they're going to be the number 1 team in the country next year? No. But I do think they're going to improve probably more than those other 3 teams I mentioned throughout the season, because obviously this Duke team is going to be younger than them, but they're going to be more talented. So will they be the best team to start next year? No, but I think by the end of next season, Duke could end up being the best team in the country. I know it's only April, but their roster is just looking really good for April. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you like, subscribe for more content, for college basketball content. But the transfer portal, we have about a month more of time where players can enter. So rosters are going to be changing a lot between now and then. But Duke, again, is a roster that seems to be pretty set, and one that will be exciting to hear about as the off-season goes on.